Hi everyone, and welcome to the Writing Center's presentation on comma rules. Today we are going to focus exclusively on using commas in a series. Now there are different ways that you use commas, and you can find those tips in some of the other videos on our channel. Before we go into our lesson today, let's look at why we use commas. We use commas to divide parts of a sentence for various purposes, including clarity, emphasis, contrast, differentiating ideas, words, or phrases, and ultimately to give pause when reading a sentence. Commas are our clue to give the reader a pause to catch his or her breath, as well as other forms of punctuation. So if you are reading a sentence and there's no point of punctuation, you find yourself running out of breath, odds are that you're missing a comma or you're missing another point of punctuation. So when we use commas between items in a series, we use them when we're listing 3 or more words, clauses, or phrases. So for instance, let's look at this first example sentence. Listen to where I naturally pause when I read this sentence. Students will need to bring a planner, notebook, and pencil to class. I have 3 different items listed, and I'm going to place a comma after each, starting with planner, comma, notebook, comma, and notice I'm not going to put a comma after pencil, but I am putting a comma after notebook before our conjunction and. That's called the Oxford comma that we'll get into in a couple of slides. The same rule applies when you're separating 3 or more clauses, which are groups of words that include a subject and a verb. I promise you that I will show up, comma, that I will try my hardest, comma, and that I will win. The commas separate our 3 different promises that you're making. Same rule applies with phrases. I looked all through my purse, comma, around my house, comma, and in my car for my phone. The commas separate the 3 different places that I looked for my phone. Using commas in a series also changes the meaning of a sentence. Remember that you pause every time you have a comma. You do not pause when you have no punctuation. So this sentence right here, I like cooking my family and my pets, meaning you're actually cooking your family and your pets. If you meant to list 3 things that you like, you'd place a comma after each, and it would read like this. I like cooking, my family, and my pets. Punctuation changes everything. So far, we've looked at commas in a series of 3, but commas are used in a series no matter how many words, clauses, or phrases are listed. Here we have an example of many different items listed for things that I personally would probably overpack if I were going for a small weekend getaway. Right now, I'd like you to pause this video and do 2 things. First, read the sentence pausing in each comma, noting how it differentiates each item. Then I challenge you to read the sentence without pausing at the commas as though they weren't there, and see how quickly you run out of breath. I mentioned in one of our earlier slides the Oxford comma, which is a point of controversy for English language people. So the Oxford comma is that red circled comma right before the conjunction and when you're listing 3 or more items. A lot of people have decided that they don't like to use the Oxford comma, and so you may have not used it in the past, or you may have seen it not used in the past. However, using the Oxford comma and not using it have 2 different meanings a lot of different times. So let's look at the example on the right. If you are meaning to list 3 different things that you had for breakfast, you use the Oxford comma, which would read, I had eggs, toast, and orange juice. When you omit the Oxford comma, as we do on the bottom, it changes the meaning. I had eggs, toast, and orange juice, meaning you had toast and orange juice together, and by all means, if that's the way that you like your toast, who am I to judge? But if you meant the first one, use that comma before the conjunction to clarify what you're trying to say. Finally, on our last slide, let's look at how you'll use commas in your traditional 3-point thesis statement. So your 3-point thesis statements, as seen in this example for a process essay thesis statement, always have a claim and then 3 pieces of evidence separated by commas. Here we have our claim. There are 3 steps necessary to making a face mask. We list our point 1, choosing the material, comma, our second point, cutting the material, comma, and our last point, attaching elastic. These rules also apply for other types of thesis statements, such as a division and classification essay and a research essay. I suggest you pause the video here and look over some of these thesis statements, noting how the commas are placed after each point, which then becomes a paragraph in your essay. So thank you for viewing our presentation on comma rules in a series. If you'd like any extra help, please make sure to check out the other videos on the channel. And also, as always, you can make a Writing Center appointment where you can get help one-on-one with one of our collaborators. Hope that you enjoy this presentation. Happy writing!